I speak to the Mexican people from the city this time, from where I have to come back forced by circumstances and impulsed by my love to the people, to create a new management of peace. Shoulder by shoulder, we shall work together for the spiritual harmony of the great Mexican family, and feel proud of the homeland that belongs to everyone. Mexican brothers, men and women, united in the same ideal, in the same hope, in the same illusions for progress of democracy and liberty and justice.
Fulgencio Batista was born on January 16, 1901 in Cuba, and he died the 6th of August 1973 in Spain. He was a soldier, a politician who ruled Cuba in two occasions, the first one from October 10, 1940, and the same day and month, but 4 years later, 1944. The second period of his government was from March 10, 1952 to January 1, 1959. His first period as Cuban leader is considered as a presidential era because he was chosen as president in 1940, and after 4 years his time at this charge was over. However, his second period is considered as a dictatorship because he controlled everything in relation to the state. In order to avoid the end of his government with him in charge, he made fraudulent elections so that he could be re-elected. Fulgencio Batista and his rise to power. 1933 coup. His first important act to begin his rise to power was a coup against the government of Gerardo Machao's era as president. It was known as the Segran's Revolt, which had the objective to finish Machao's government. Batista was involved in different movements which were consolidated on the 4th of September 1933 with the civilian military movement, and the Pentarchy was established. This way, government board confirmed 5 members which were against Machao's and his government. Some days after, Ramon Grau San Martin became president and he made Batista the army chief. However, Batista was able to take down Grau's government, and since 1933 he pays presidents who followed his orders. Because of this, some people consider Batista his first period as a leader of Cuba began since 1933 to 1944. Military coup 1952. After his first period as president, Batista wanted to retake the charge and he began to start another campaign. Despite this, on March 10, 1952, he guided a military coup that took power by himself 3 months before the Cuban elections of that year. Even though the method of taking the government was authoritarian, Batista was able to make the United States consider his government as an official state. Consolidation with the power, first period. In his first period, Batista was able to take control of the power with a coup. Before he was able to take absolute control over the country, he had to place some puppet presidents to maintain power. Some examples of these presidents are José Barnet, Miguel Mariano Gómez, and Federico Laredo Bru. Once he was able to officially become president of Cuba, he defined the government's ideology. Batista began to support the Democratic Socialist Coalition, which was confirmed by different parties, and one of them was a Communist Party. By contrast, Batista considered himself capitalist, and he wanted to follow the US capitalism, but he wasn't able of doing it completely because of the pressure from the Communist Party of Cuba. Cuban communists let Batista reach power and stay it by doing different actions, such as fighting the opposition and work with the labor unions which Batista supported. With the Second World War, Batista decided that Cuba declared war to Germany and Italy. Batista had some relations with the US government, but they were not too useful in its first period as a leader. Second period. When Batista was able to return to Cuba's power, he also continued developing his ideals. This time he was capable of creating a bigger impact because he already had his objectives established, and he was a leader for a longer time. In this period, Batista was able to make Cuba a recognized state for the United States. This has its consequence because the United States started to influence in the economy of the country in big scale. However, Batista was following his plan to become a capitalist country guided by the United States model. Cuba's economy was developed, and this country became one of the 5 most developed in Latin America. Despite of this, a third part of the Cuban population was living in poverty. Cuba became a country with many civilians living in poverty and others living in good conditions. This was caused by the industrialization guided by the Batista, which started to show a benefit in the Cuban economy and society. Control of culture, education, religion, and propaganda. Culture. Batista government wanted to convince the Cuban civilization that they should follow the US capitalism because it will help them get out of poverty and they will become an industrialized country. This was shown by the desire of Batista for Cuba to transform into a capitalist country and the strong relation that he had with the government of the United States. However, the Cuban citizens didn't know that the USA began to control their economy. Some years after Batista's second period, the United States owned 90% of Cuban mines, 80% of its public utilities, 50% of its railways, 40% of the sugar production, and 25% of its bank deposits. Education. Cuban education was very low before 1959. There was a high number of illiterates in Cuba and few kids attended to classes. These factors could be seen mainly outside of the cities, the rural zones. Some sources say that the government had a plan to make the assistance to school obligatory between 6 and 14 years, but this was never applied. Religion. Fulgencio Batista considered as himself a Catholic, and he needed a religion if he wanted to establish capitalism, such as the United States had Calvinism. Batista adapted the Catholic religion to the country, and instead of banning it, he used it for the country. Propaganda. Fulgencio Batista didn't use a lot of propaganda, but instead this was used against him. This is clearly shown with the propaganda used by Castro and his followers who were against capitalism and other ideas that Batista followed. Internal policy. Batista's internal policy was limited because he depended on other countries. His government was very corrupt, and as a consequence of their relations with the organized crime. During his second period, Havana was full with casinos, drugs, prostitutes, corrupted policemen, and politics chosen by Batista with a fraudulent method. On the other hand, Cuba became one of the 5 countries in Latin America with the best development. Cuba's gross domestic product reached a level in which it was the same as Italy. However, there were still many Cubans who lived in poverty. Cubans weren't able to work in many types of jobs because a high percentage of the population was illiterate. Batista wanted to follow the capitalism ideas, but he had a strong relation with the Communist Party, which limited his decisions. He always had to take into consideration the communist ideas because they supported him and fought the opposition. External policy. Batista's government had many relations with other countries, mainly with capitalists. He had the desire for Cuba to become a capitalist country, and this is why he started their relations with the United States. These countries supported Cuba's economy, but then they started to depend in the US because of the amount of money invested in the island. Approximately $1 billion of total Cuban mines, public utilities, railways, sugar production, and bank deposits. To show his support towards capitalism, Batista declared war to Germany and Italy during the Second World War. He was able to get the US support, but this was lost after the Cuban Revolution when Fidel Castro took power.
Authoritarian leaders use people's emotions in different ways in order to gain their votes and support. These leaders say what people want to hear. They tend to speak about the negative things from a government that has got people unsatisfied, and also criticize that in order to make people believe that they're on the same channel as them, the authoritarian leaders, and then people will start to support them. However, they don't notice that the leaders aren't talking about their projects, as they know that the real personal ideas may not be approved and may not convince the people. So they, the authoritarian leaders, use that strategy that in a way manipulates people's thoughts.